In today's episode, I talk about copper pens, which inks look best in a demonstrator, and some of the craziest products people have sent me to try to sell. Well, hey there, Brian Goulet here of GouletPens.com, and it is episode number 152. Coming back this week after doing a live Q&A last week, something a little different that we tried, and we got some good feedback. It's a nice learning experience for me and the team to do it, because as you know, when it comes to doing things live, anything can happen. We had a couple of snags and we had some learning experiences, but overall it was really fun, very engaging. I very much enjoyed doing that. Ties back nicely to when we used to do like Right Time way back in the day. If you loyal Goulet fans remember Right Time, and then doing Periscope, that was really big last year, the previous year, and then into last year, and then now there's like Instagram Live and Facebook Live, YouTube Live. There's a lot of different live things going on. So we've been doing live video for like 7 years here at Goulet, but it's fun to bring that up every now and then. It is difficult to kind of keep it up, but it wouldn't be something we could probably do every week, but it's certainly something we can bring back. So if that feedback was really good, I know that's something a lot of you asked about. We didn't really hype it up ahead of time because we didn't really know if we'd be able to make it happen. So we just kind of like did it, but it was still fun. So in the future, I think if we do it, we would maybe plan it out a little more ahead of time and give you a heads up that it's going to happen. But it was good. From a personal standpoint, I'm kind of getting like back on the wagon health-wise, much like everybody. I ate way too much in the holidays, and not just in the holidays, but like all of last year. If you've been following my personal kind of situation, I had a lot of very, challenging life things happen in my personal life last year, and I just kind of didn't really prioritize my own health so much. And I'm also kind of a stress eater, and I have a sweet tooth. So all of those things combined really just makes it to be where I can very quickly fall off the wagon. So I had gained probably 25 pounds last year. You may have noticed it since you are watching me every week, but it comes on easily. That's my weight's always fluctuated like that. I'm a big guy. I'm 6'1". I was up to 235 pounds just a few weeks ago. Now I'm down to 222. So back on the wagon. I'm doing basically kind of the similar thing to what I did previously. If you remember my videos from way back in the day, about 3.5 years ago, I lost about 65 pounds total. So I did it basically just through, I used an app called MyFitnessPal, which is kind of a calorie counting, nutrition app. That works well for me. I know counting calories is not everything, but it's just more just the accountability of having to be conscious of my food. So I'm, eating less, I'm not snacking in between meals and all that kind of stuff. And then, just exercising a little more regularly. So it's all good. I'm trying to get more sleep too. That's not really working so well right now. Of course, I've had 2 kids with a stomach bug in the last week, and Rachel and I are just kind of waiting around like, oh boy, when's it going to hit us too, But that's just life, I'm just in that really exciting stage of life where it's like all coming at me from every direction. So it's a lot of fun. But anyway, so if you're on that train trying to get healthy after the holidays, I am right there with you. We can do it together, okay? Also got a new computer. I don't know if you can really tell or if it matters. No, it's kind of out of the shot, but I got the new MacBook with the touch bar. Ooh, and got it in space gray, so that's kind of cool. My old computer was like over 4 years old, so it had done its time, but it was time to upgrade a little bit, and it was kind of fun. So that's just something, just because you see it in Q&A every now and then, if you happen to notice. Product-wise, we haven't had a lot of new stuff coming in yet, but we will. We've had Robert Oster inks. That's been the kind of the biggest thing that we've had going on in 2017 so far. So it's an Australian ink brand, and it's pretty cool. They got some exciting colors, so that's kind of fun. So be sure to check those out. I got them all swabbed up. They're all on the site. They're all in sample form and everything. We did it right, so you can check those out. I got Fire and Ice inked up in my pen right now, so that's kind of cool. We're going to have more new products coming. What happens is after the holidays, I think I talked about this a couple weeks ago, but, a lot of manufacturers come out with new stuff for the holidays. So after the holidays, it's like this vacuum of new things coming out, unless we're just happen to pick up, new regular things. So we will have some new stuff that'll be coming, you know, like Montegrappa Passion, that'll be coming. I'm excited about that. It's a little more expensive pen, but it's super nice. That's actually what I have Fire and Ice inked up in right now, but very cool. And then just a heads up for any of you who are, you know, looking for reasons to write more, NaCoWriMo is coming up next month. So for the month of February, it's International Correspondence Writers Month. So we actually have talked about it a little bit on the blog. We've been pushing, you know, sealing wax and correspondence stuff, you know, content on our blog and whatnot. So you've probably seen that a little bit this week if you follow what we do. But basically, you just, you know, are challenged to write a letter and mail it to somebody every day for the month of February. So, you know, it's kind of cool. I personally have not participated in it before because my life is a little crazy and I have not quite taken that on yet, but I know a lot of people that have. I've been on various people's lists sometimes, so I usually get some letters in during the month of February. I try to write everybody back. Last year it took me until like June until I actually was able to do it, but you know, I finally did it. But and then this is just kind of funny. Drew, our customer care manager, you know, is really particular about pronouncing it NaCoWriMo, and a bunch of other people pronounce it NaCoWriMo. So I'm just kind of curious, not the question of the week, but just a kind of question of the moment, is do you pronounce it NaCoWriMo or NaCoWriMo? I'm just very curious to know. That way I can kind of rub it in Drew's face if NaCoWriMo is more popular. He's like, it's the word right. It should be NaCoWriMo. That's what makes more sense. It's fun. So I should say NaCoWriMo just to make him mad. Anyway, that's what you do to the ones that you care about, right? Okay. So before I get into the questions for this week, you know, I had originally kind of prepped these from last week. We didn't actually ask for questions this week, so all these questions are from last week. So if you're like, what the heck, you know, then that's where this is coming from. So, and then we'll pick up any questions that are coming from this past week into the following week. So just a little, you know, logistics there for you. But so I'm going to kick it off with some pen and writing questions. First one is from Ryan Wolf 2420 on Instagram. What's the best pen to use with Liberty Elysium? So this is Noodler's Liberty Elysium, an exclusive color of ours. You know, honestly, there's not like one pen that you have to use for that ink. I think, you know, that ink it's not a 100% conventional ink. It does have some waterproof properties to it. It's not fully bulletproof, fully waterproof, but it's kind of like halfway in between. So it kind of straddles the line a little bit. So it's a unique ink sort of in that way. It tends to flow a little wetter. It tends to write just a little bit broader on the paper. It's those permanent qualities that it has. That's not uncommon for a lot of permanent inks, especially the Noodler's ones, that absorb down into the paper and get that absorbency and that permanency, excuse me, especially if you're talking about like the Polar inks, the Warden series, you know, the Bad Belted Kingfisher, all that, they absorb into the paper a lot more. So it looks a little broader. So you may want to go something with a little bit finer nib. That is something that tends to work pretty well because it'll look a little bit broader. This ink will look a little broader than maybe some other ones will. It can also be just a little bit dry in the pen, not as it's writing, but it can dry kind of up on the nib if you don't have a pen that seals really well, especially this time of year. If you're in, you know, the Northern Hemisphere, it's wintertime, it's cold. There's not a lot of humidity in the air, so your pens can actually dry out faster than maybe in the summertime. Now, in the summertime, if you have a very dry heat, it's kind of the same effect. It doesn't have so much to do with the temperature, it has to do with humidity. So if you have a very dry environment and you have a pen that doesn't seal that well on the cap, the ink can dry out a little bit more, and this is one of those inks that, you know, it's not extreme, but it's a little more leaning that way than, you know, conventional, you know, ink. So there's a number of pens that I've used it with successfully, and a lot of people have talked about it successfully. You know, Pilot Metropolitan being one, the Lamy Safari, you know, really any of those Lamy pens, Safari All-Star, Vista, any of those, TWSBIs, you know, 580 Eco, Lamy 2000 and Pilot Custom 74. A lot of these I hear talked about because, you know, they're great kind of in that entry-level range, whether it's entry-level gold nib or kind of entry-level, you know, steel nib. Those are some of the more popular ones of that way. So I think I just hear about those a lot with that ink just because that's what, you know, you can look at the product reviews on our site. And there's a mixture of reviews. You know, we don't hide the bad reviews. There's some people that it does dry out, and I think maybe some of that has to do with environment and some other factors. But some people say, you know, it dries a little bit more or whatever. So definitely I encourage you to look. There's, you know, 300 product reviews or something on Liberty Elysium. There's a lot of people in there that mention different pens that they're using, and particularly the ones that are having good experiences. You probably want to stick to those. You know, the Lamy Safari and Extra Fine, I think, is one that I keep hearing about as working pretty well with it. So that's probably the one that I would recommend just starting out. But you don't have to stick to any one. You can try it in a bunch of different ones and see which one works best for you. All right, this is from Aaron S. on Facebook. I want to buy a copper pen, but need help picking between the Karas Kustoms Ink, Tactile Turn Gist, and the Montegrappa Copper Mule. Which one would you pick if you could only choose one? Ooh, that's a tough choice, especially because there's such a price range between all these. So I have all three of them right here, so I'll go ahead and give you a little rundown, little comparison. I know you always appreciate the comparisons when I do them in the Q&A, so I'm happy to do that here for you. So the Karas Kustoms Ink is not only the heaviest pen that I think I've ever used, it's really heavy in this copper. The copper material, the density of copper is greater than brass or aluminum or anything. So if you're getting the Karas Kustoms Ink, the copper is the heaviest version of it. So this one is going to run you $200. Copper is expensive and you got to machine it and all that kind of stuff. So some of the pros, I did pros and cons list here. It's big, it's heavy, it's solid. Kind of minimal disruption to the body, so the patina will show really nicely. Whenever I'm thinking about copper, I'm thinking about letting it patina over time. This is a new one, so it's nice and shiny. I don't shine up my copper pens. This is a brand new one I just grabbed off the shelf, so it looks maximum shininess. I mean, you can actually polish it even shinier if you want to, but it's relatively untarnished. You know, whereas my Copper Mule, for example, has been sitting for a while, and it has a patina and some different color things going on with it, but I like kind of that natural look, but you can polish it. You can do whatever you want. That's kind of the cool thing about copper. So the fact that it's kind of unbroken, it doesn't have a center band or anything, it doesn't have anything crazy going on, you get some of that patina effect really nicely on this pen. So the cons are some of the similar ones. It's big, heavy, it's really solid. It's not really great for a long form writer. You can't cap the pen. Well, you can cap the pen, but it you know, it doesn't really secure well. So I wouldn't recommend posting it. Not that you're really going to want to, because it's so heavy anyway. It's not really going to help you a whole ton. So, you know, and then the clip is kind of tight. It's a stainless steel clip, so it's really durable, but it's really stiff as well. So if you've got really delicate clothing, you know, a dress shirt or something like that, this thing is gonna be so heavy, it's gonna lag down in there, it's gonna snag. So it's not really made for that. It's really made as more of like a machinist pen, you know? It's like the guys that make these are machinists and they're kind of rough and tumble, and that's really cool. But it's not really exactly a pen for, you know, around the office or the courthouse. If you're a lawyer or something, you're not gonna whip this thing out, most likely. So that's the ink for Karas Kustoms. The Tactile Turn Gist is the next one that you kind of mentioned. So this one's a little bit different. It's a little slimmer. It's a little more tapered look to it. Sort of like a Lamy 2000-esque kind of, blimp style shape here, where it tapers on both ends. So this one, the material, it's going to patina, but it's not going to patina quite as evenly because it's got these ridges that are cut, you know, as like a spiral down the whole pen. So it gives you a lot of good grip, which is really nice. Of course, the copper itself, like it's got a pretty decent grip to it already. It's not, even though it's a smooth, you know, it'll grip, and as it patinas, I feel like it grips even better once it patinas. I don't know if that's actually the case. Maybe it's just, you know, in my own mind. I feel like it is. But this one, because it's got the spiral fluted kind of cut thing, not fluted, but, you know, it's just got a little cut on there, makes it really easy to grab. But when it patinas over time, you know, I have one of these personally, which I left at home, so I grabbed one off the shelf to show you, but this one is relatively shiny because it's newer. Mine is very patinaed. It's more like the brown color of my Copper Mule. And you know, because it's got the cut, it doesn't have like a big continuous kind of look to its patina splotches. It's a little more piecemeal. So that's just one thing that matters to you at all. It's more compact. It's a good pocket pen. It's got a relatively stiff clip as well, but it's also very durable. I find this clip to be a little easier to use than the Karas Kustoms one. I don't know why. It's just how it is. I find it's a great carry-around pen, you know, good pocket pen. It's not too heavy for a copper pen. I mean, all copper pens are going to be fairly heavy, but I've carried this one around a bit myself, and it's fairly manageable. And both pens are standard. I mean, actually, all three of these pens are standard international, and they all take converters, so that's not really a thing. So you don't have to worry about that. And the nice thing about copper, too, while I'm thinking of it, it's biostatic. So it's you know, antimicrobial. So it'll actually kind of naturally, it's more hygienic. So, and it's great for people with like allergies and stuff like that too, unless you're allergic to copper, in which case it would be really bad. But you know, you're allergic to other things, it might not be so bad. What else did I have in here? It's the most affordable of the group too. So this is $139 for this one. So $200 for this one. A lot of that's just the size, you know, and it's different manufacturer and stuff. But these are both made in America too, which is kind of a plus as well. Maybe it's not for you, but I find that to be a plus. Some of the cons of this one, it's not as easy to polish. If you like to try to keep it shiny, you can't go this way with it because of the ridges. It's just going to tear your polishing cloth apart. So you have to polish it around, which really isn't a problem. You just have to be aware of it. So you have to be a little more intentional about how you polish it. I don't polish mine, so I don't worry about that. But if you are trying to keep it shinier, that's something you're going to be dealing with. And yeah, that's about it. It's just not quite as shiny. And then the other one is the Montegrappa Copper Mule. So this is the most expensive one of the group, $375. So it's definitely a little pricier, but it's more kind of fit and finish than the rest of them. These are definitely like, you can tell these are both made by, you know, American machinists, and this one is made by Italians. So, you know, a little more aesthetic kind of built into it. It's a little kind of fancier. So if you're going for, you know, something that has more of that vibe, this would definitely be it. This one is lighter than the other two. It's not a solid rod stock like this, like it's formed and stuff like that, but it's lighter, and I find it to be, you know, well balanced and things like that. It is postable, and it's actually fairly usable while it's posted too. The other two, maybe not so much. Well, now that I think about it, I don't know that I really post my copper one. It's definitely postable. Yeah, it's actually not too bad. That's very postable. It's just the Karas Kustoms one that's a little impractical, just because of its size. But this one is very postable. You know, on the plus side, the aesthetics are really nice. It's got kind of a two-tone look going on, so it's got a stainless steel with the trim, you know, the clip, the nib, you know, finial on the top. So I like the aesthetics of this a lot. I really kind of dig the two-tone. And then the stainless steel has kind of like this, you know, gray-black kind of stuff going on in the threads and in the logoing here. So I really like that a lot. And then when this one polishes up, it polishes up really nice because it's very, very kind of a flawlessly formed copper. In mine, it's hard to tell, you know, in this light, but let me see if I can zoom in a little bit and just show you some of the patina. This patina will look kind of similar on all the pens, but over time, see how it, you can kind of catch a little bit. You can see under the clip there, where I haven't been touching it very much, that it's still got more of its natural kind of shiny copper state. That's what it came looking like. You know, it actually came looking more like this in its copper, but it's really browned up quite a bit. And then it kind of gets like your fingerprints, the oil in your fingerprints will leave kind of fingerprints on it at first, and then it'll get kind of tarnished, and you can get even some like blue and green and red hues in it. They're not coming out super strong right now, but that is definitely something that forms over time with the pen. So that's the coolest thing I think about copper. So it's the most elegant design of the bunch. It's got the two-tone look. I find that to be a pro. Very smooth capping action. The other ones are just metal on metal threads. This one, it's actually got, I don't know if it's what kind of, you know, plastic it is in here, but it's plastic on metal, which, you know, I personally think makes a world of difference in terms of how it feels when it threads, and then it threads nice and crisp. So it feels like a different experience when you're capping the pen. And then, you know, it just polishes up really nice, just like the Karas Kustoms. The cons, it's most expensive. The center band is fairly prominent, so it kind of breaks up the visual look a little bit. Maybe that's really going to be a preference thing for you. And that's kind of it. And it's got the, you know, the clip on this one is pretty nice, fairly stiff as well, but it's got a little roller wheel at the end of the clip, so that kind of helps. A little bit easier to use on like dress shirts and stuff like that. And this is kind of more of a pen that I would think you'd carry in a dress shirt than maybe the other two. But you can do whatever you want, honestly. I mean, heck, it's your life. So when it comes down to which one would I choose, that's a tough one. Honestly, they're all great copper pens. I would highly recommend any of them. It's going to boil down to your own personal preference, really. I would say if you're just trying to go for a copper pen, you want something a little more accessible, I really like the Tactile Turn. That's just kind of me. It's a little more of a pocket pen. I find that I love the Karas Kustom. It's just so heavy. It's so heavy. But, you know, it is the most popular style of the Karas Kustoms we sell. Is I think the copper ink actually is our, I might have to pull the numbers recently after our holiday seasons, but I think that the Copper Ink is our top selling Karas Kustoms pen, if I'm not mistaken. Go figure. And then I really like the Copper Mule as well. It is a little pricier though, so it's a little less accessible. So I think, you know, if it really came down to it, oh gosh, I don't know. I don't personally have a Karas Kustoms, so I feel like I can't choose that one. That would be hypocritical. I do have both of the other two. I end up carrying around and using the Montegrappa more. So I guess without price being a serious factor here, I would say the Copper Mule is what I'm ending up using in my daily life a little bit more. There it is. But really, I can recommend any of them. All right, I said that already. All right, this is Katie.wk on Instagram. I've already got a Lamy Safari and a Pilot Metropolitan, and my ink collection is an okay size. I'm looking into buying a TWSBI pen next, but I'm a little confused as to how different the Eco and the Diamond 580 actually are. Should I stick with the less expensive Eco and get a nicer bottle of ink with it, or is buying the more costly 580 and sticking with the ink I've got worth the extra money? So, this is a great question. I really wanted to take this so that we could slice it out and, you know, make it its own video, because I get a lot of questions comparing the Eco and the 580. I thought this was a nice little twist, throwing the ink thing in there too. So the Eco and the 580 are actually fairly similar. There are some distinct differences, but I don't know that it's like twice the price worth kind of differences. So, you know, TWSBI came out with the 580 before the Eco, so that was kind of more like the standard pen. And then the Eco was the first pen they came out with that cost less than the 580, which the 580 at $50 for a piston filling pen is already a really good deal. It's a nice writing pen. The piston action on it is very smooth. You can disassemble it. It's got interchangeable nib units. Like, it's got a lot going on. It's a demonstrator, which a lot of people love. It's got a nice cap insert, so it seals well. It's really well thought out. So I've been a big fan of TWSBI for a number of years. It's a very popular pen for those who are starting out in the fountain pen world because it's such a good value. Yes, they're not perfect, and they've gone through, you know, they're relatively, as far as the models of pens go, they've been around for, you know, 5 years, 6 years or so, but it's not like, you know, huge amount of time in the grand scheme of things. So they've been working out some manufacturing things, especially in the early years. They're a lot more stable now. But, you know, the design, the diamond design on the body of the pen is really kind of unique and kind of cool and very signature for the 580. So when they wanted to come out with an even more economical pen, which is where the word eco comes from, it doesn't come from like hopping on the green, you know, energy train or anything like that. It has nothing to do with that kind of eco, but it has to do with eco in terms of economy, being an affordable pen. That's where the name Eco comes from, if you're not familiar. But it's very similar in size overall to the 580. The piston mechanism is actually, I don't know if it's exactly identical, but it sure as heck looks the exact same to me. The nib is a little bit different. It uses a smaller number 4 size nib as opposed to a number 5 that's on the 580. This is a 580 all, by the way. It's got the aluminum grip section and stuff, just in case you're wondering, but still, same concept. The big difference between this from a design aspect is it does not have the diamond barrel. It's just got a straight barrel, and it's a different type of plastic that's used to achieve that. So it's treated differently. It's a little bit different. It's a more cost-effective way to manufacture it, which is why it costs less. And then as far as the grip goes, it does not have an interchangeable nib unit. It's affixed to the pen. It does have a nib and feed that you can theoretically pull out. You have to be careful because the feeds are very soft and you can bend those fins easier than you would probably prefer. But then it just kind of fits back nicely in there. If you've done it a few times, it's not too bad to get the hang of it. But that's what it's all about there. And then it has a hexagonal cap with the same kind of insert in the top that seals it off nicely, O-ring at the base and everything. So still seals really well, still performs well. Heard a few things about it, like kind of burping and leaking here and there. Honestly, most of the time what happens with the Eco, the reason it can burp and leak a little bit is because air bubbles and stuff get trapped up in this feed because it's got this affixed grip and just the way that the feed is designed in there. So when you're going to fill it, what will help a lot, fill it and then expel out some and then fill it again. So get those air bubbles out of the grip section. And then once it's completely full, just drip a couple of drips out and then let it go. and then you're good to write. That will fix 90% probably. I don't know, there's a hard number, but that will probably fix about 90% of those leaking issues that you hear about with the TWSBI Eco. 580 doesn't deal with that quite as much. So that's about it. But it's almost half the price to get an Eco. You know, it's like $28.99 versus $50, or a little bit more if you get the all version. But it's really, really pretty good. So personally, I would say if you care a little bit less about the aesthetics and more about the function of the pen, the Eco is going to be the better value, and then you can get some extra ink. You know, you can get a bottle of Roshizuku almost at that price, or you could get like a couple of bottles of some less expensive ink. It's really up to you, but that's kind of where I end up landing. I have both pens. I enjoy both pens. I think I actually have more Ecos at this point than I do 580s. I have a bunch of 540s. That was the previous version of these, and they were in more colors and stuff like that. Those I could not resist, especially the blue one. But anyway, so the Eco, I think, is more of the bang for the buck, but certainly the 580 is a worthy pen as well. It really just depends on what's most important to you. It's mainly an aesthetic difference. All right. Mary P. on Facebook says, I really like the Charlie pen that came with my Noodler's Heart of Darkness 4.5 ounce bottle. Why doesn't Noodler's sell these little pens separately? Also, how does Nathan decide which inks he offers in the 4.5 ounce bottles? So kind of a two-parter here. So this pen is called the Charlie pen. If you're not familiar with it, I'll zoom in a little bit. It is only available as a free pen with select 4.5 ounce Noodler's bottles. So it's right here. Yes, it's got a nice little yellow grip thing here. That's just a reaction that the plastic has with the grease that's used on here. But it's an eyedropper only fill pen. Nathan feels very strongly about not having cartridges available for Noodler's ink, so he makes his pens only usable by eyedropper. And, you know, it's just a stainless steel nib, nothing too fancy, small nib. You know, I believe it's a number 2 size. And the cap is nice. It's got kind of a rainbow swirl going on here. Why doesn't he make it available for sale separately? I think it's just a very low price point. I honestly don't have a 100% great answer for you. I think part of it has to do with just stock availability. The fact that he offers it as a free pen with his inks, that kind of consumes most of what he's able to make available with these. And I think part of it is he just wants the ink to have something special with them. So a little bit of history for some of the free Noodler's ink pens. It used to, back in the day, be a Preppy that was eyedropper converted. And it actually, back in the day, Nathan, because he did not want cartridges to be used in his pens that came with his ink, he would actually remove the post that allowed the cartridge to affix, because it was a platinum Preppy, so he would remove the post and then convert it to an eyedropper. He himself would do that with all that he has going on. I was like, Nathan, come on, you're a busy guy. And then in its last iterations, they actually printed Noodler's ink on the side there. They used to just come plain. And that was previously what was available. That was when I first got into the Goulet Pen Company, what was coming in the Noodler's inks. Then he went through a little bit of a phase where he had these pens, which were different colors, and they were kind of demonstrator barrel and had the color on the back to match the pen. And I'll just kind of pick the blue one because blue is the best color in the world. You know, same nib and everything that's on the Charlie pen, same feed, but eyedropper only, had Noodler's ink inscribed into the barrel. These ones, you know, did okay, honestly. People were pretty happy with them. You get a dud every now and then, but it's a free pen, and, you know, how much can you really complain about a free pen? You know, they did pretty well, but I think he had problems sourcing them and couldn't get a consistent supply of them. So he wanted to go with something that was, you know, a little more consistent for him, and then hence the Charlie pen. That's where it came about. Yeah, here's Charlie pen. So, you know, I think part of it's just costs. Maybe it's not cost effective for him to try to actually sell these and service these pens. But that's why I don't have like 100% great explanation for why he doesn't make them available, but I know part of the reason is he wants to keep it special to the inks. And then how does Nathan decide which inks he offers in the 4.5 ounce bottles in general? A lot of it just has to do with economy. So some of the ink that he makes it's, you know, he's all about keeping the costs low. Noodler's is. You know, it's very good ink economy for the amount that you're getting, especially for some of the properties that he has in these inks. They're kind of expensive chemicals sometimes that are used to make these inks, and he wants to keep it as economical as possible. So, you know, he'll only charge more for inks if he absolutely has to. And, you know, a lot of the cost has to do with bottling and the bottle itself and the labels and all that kind of stuff. So he will do the larger bottles sometimes for those inks when, you know, there's a little bit higher cost, so that he can keep the cost down a little bit and give a little more ink economy. But, you know, some of it I'm not 100% sure why. I think part of it's just demand too. Some of the more popular colors that he puts in the 4.5 ounces. But there's not like a hard, fast rule as to why there are some in ones and some in the others. But the ones I know that he does not put these pens in every single 4.5 ounce. And a lot of that just has to do with cost. You know, if he can absorb the cost of a free pen in with a 4.5 ounce bottle of ink, he'll include that in there. But he literally like does not charge a difference whether he includes a pen or not. The difference you see in price has to do with the chemical and what's in the ink. But he doesn't like do an upcharge and just add like $3 or $5 onto a bottle of ink just because he includes a pen with it. He really is using the pen as a free pen, just to add value to you when you buy those inks. So that's really his thing. So it's a little bit of a Willy Wonka kind of thing that he's got going on as far as this stuff goes. But, you know, that's Nathan. He's got his stamp on the Noodler's company, and that's kind of part of the magic of his brand. So that's all I know about that. So let's go on. I got a couple of ink questions here. This one is from perrybeachy on Instagram. I've noticed some inks really stick to the sides of my demonstrator pens. Do you have a top 7 list of cool inks that display nicely in a demonstrator pen? So by your question, I can't tell if you like inks that stick to the sides of your pen and you want ones like that, or you don't like that. I couldn't really tell, so I didn't really address that too much one way or another in my answer that I prepared here. I had to think about it. Really, I just kind of went with which ones do I think are the coolest. I personally enjoy ones that don't really stick all that much, but, you know, that don't like kind of coat. Like Bay State Blue is one of the most coating inks around. And I know that ink has kind of a reputation for like sticking in general and staining and all that kind of stuff. It cleans up with bleach. It doesn't clean up the same way that other inks do. But bleach cleans it up. It cuts right through it. So that's what, you know, just kind of a regular, just side note there. But some of the ones that I enjoy the most, you know, it's usually lighter saturated colors that tend to look really good in a demonstrator. You would think that like, oh, if I have a really vibrant blue or something like that on paper, that's going to look amazing in my pen. Well, maybe, but half the time it's just going to end up looking like a big dark blob, and it's just going to look black. You know, the ones that look really cool are the ones that are like lighter yellows and reds and things like that, that you can actually see some translucence, because especially when you're thinking about, you know, a pen like the Eco or the 580, there's a good amount of ink that's in here. And if you know, pick up any normal bottle of ink, now granted a bottle of ink is going to be thicker than, you know, a normal thing, but like here I've got, well, this is a bad example because that's Noodler's Black. Let me pick an actual color. Okay. So like Konpeki. So it looks cool when it's up on the sides because it's clinging a little bit, and that looks kind of cool. But down here at the bottom, it's blue, but you can't tell. It just looks black down here. But it's only when you have it, so it's like, it's got to have a good like slosh factor. I don't know if that's a thing, but it is now, slosh factor. So if it has a good slosh factor, then it can look kind of cool. And sometimes there's inks that can have different characteristics to them, you know, a little bit of shimmer, a little bit of shine, shimmer-tastics, you know, the Jeroboam 1670s can look really cool. Those tend to do pretty well. So I find that like reds, blues, and greens tend to do pretty well in demonstrators for the most part. Let's see here. The ones that I think generally look pretty good in a demonstrator is like the Pilot Hiroshizukus usually look pretty darn good, because then you get this kind of thing. it doesn't cling to the side, but it hangs there a little bit and kind of runs, kind of like when you have a glass of wine and it's got legs, you know what I mean? It's got kind of that going on with it, so it looks kind of cool inside a pen. Diatramentis inks, not the document inks because those cling a little bit, but the regular conventional inks. J.R. Bond tends to do pretty well. Diamine, a lot of them tend to do pretty well. It's not an exhaustive list, but those are some brands that just kind of start you off with. And then some that can look, you know, kind of interesting effects, like I just mentioned, the Shimmertastics, the J.R. Bond 1670s. You know, I think Emerald of Chivor is a really cool one because you get kind of some of the fallout of that glittery stuff, and that can kind of, you can swirl it around in your pen. You can actually see the glitter kind of move as you're twirling the pen. It's great if you're kind of bored in a meeting or at a class or something like that. You just kind of like look back and forth and just don't get caught daydreaming in class with your pen. So Emerald of Chivor would be on my lists. I think Diatramentis Atlantic Blue maybe would be on there, and I solicited my team for this too to see kind of just like what everybody's favorites were. So Atlantic Blue, it's a little bit darker blue, but that's one that came up. Noodler's Apache Sunset, that definitely, it's more of like a yellow, orange, red kind of color. That I think looks pretty good in a demonstrator. Pilot Iroshizuku Kosumosu. It's a little bit lighter pink color, but it can look pretty cool. Of course, you know, like Yamabudo looks pretty good, and you know, there's a lot of like deep magentas that can look pretty good, but that Kosumosu, because it's a little bit lighter pink, I think actually shows off a little better in a demonstrator. The Diamine Shimmertastic Golden Sands, really any Shimmertastic, but the Golden Sand is kind of cool because it's like a yellowish kind of color, but then it also has some of that shimmer gold stuff in there, so it just like really pops. Of course, Diamine Marine, which is one of my favorite inks of all time. I talk about it constantly. Got it loaded up in my pen right now. That one looks pretty good. It's a nice turquoise color. And then Diamine Blue Velvet. I have that in my, let me see if I can show that to you. It just looks so good. I put that one on Instagram lately with my London Fog. Just looks so good. So here it is. So I've got like a little bit in there. And of course it's got the blue kind of swirl in here too. So, you know, so it kind of looks kind of black when it's just in there, but then it swirls, it kind of clings a little bit, and it gets that nice blue color that kind of mixes, just scratches me in all the right places. Yeah, so that would be my list right there of 7. Of course, there's a lot of other great colors that look in there. I just really kind of just picked 7 that I liked. That can be a good jumping point for you. All right, Marcos G on Facebook asks, what type of fountain pen ink would you recommend using in a vintage fountain pen? The pen in question is a Sheaffer. Well, Sheaffer made a lot of vintage pens, so I don't really know exactly what to say about that. You know, I've got some Sheaffers, and of course they have made pens for a number of years. So I think the thing with vintage pens is you want to kind of play it safe, especially if you don't really know what you have. You want to tend to play it safe, and the best way to play it safe is to get inks that are made by pen companies. You know, things like Waterman, Parker, Pelikan, Sheaffer, Pilots, you know, a lot of these, because they're making pens that they then have to warranty, they're not going to put crazy properties in their inks that could potentially cause any problems with their pens. So they tend to play it pretty safe. The colors generally tend to be a little less saturated. They tend to not have a lot of permanent qualities to them. There's some exceptions to that, but generally speaking, that's kind of where they go. The ones where you get a little more crazy is things like, you know, Noodler's, you know, even J.R. Bond with the 1670s, you know, Diamine, Diatramentis. So these boutique companies tend to be a little more extreme in their properties, you know, because that's what they do. They push the envelope as far as ink goes. The pen companies, they want to totally play it down, so they don't go too crazy with their ink choices. So I think in general, if you're sticking with those brands, basically any brand that a pen, you know, Montegrappa, Mont Blanc, you know, all the other ones I just mentioned, Waterman, Sheaffer, Pelikan, Pilot, you know, pretty much any of these are going to be relatively stress-free for you. And then of course, if you're sticking with the brand that you actually have, like if you have a vintage Sheaffer pen and you're using Sheaffer ink, that's really playing it safe. That's probably what they would recommend. Well, granted, your pen's out of warranty if it's vintage, but that's what they're going to recommend you do if you bought a new pen. They would say, well, use our ink if you really want to be sure. So that's really the best way to go. Of course, you can do whatever you want. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. You know, the only thing that I see that is a problem for some pens is, you know, the sacks that are used on, you know, a lot of older pens, because they had, you know, rubber sacks or latex sacks or whatever, you know, don't always play nicely with certain inks. And so that's really more of a sack issue than anything, but you don't always know what you're getting when you get a vintage pen, so it's easier to kind of just play it safe. And I think that's the best approach. All right, I got a couple of business questions, and then we'll be done for the day. So this first question is from Ken C on Facebook, and this is kind of a fun one. Have you ever been approached by people or companies who want to sell you their products, where you looked at them and said to yourself, oh my gosh, I can't sell that? Whether they be hand-turned kit pens or some other thing that's not commercially viable or even just plain horrible. If so, how do you go about responding? Do you honestly explain why you can't sell them? Do you feed them a generic, not accepting new products at this time response? Or do you tell them to go away because their product sucks? His words, not mine. I would love to hear stories about crazy things you've been approached with. I've definitely been pitched some stuff. You know, it's probably not as much of it as you might think. I do get emailed about a lot of things, and people will send me pictures or, you know, ask me about if I'm interested in something or shoot me a link to a product that's already up. That's usually where some of the craziest stuff happens. Not often I actually physically end up with a product that I'm like, what the heck is this? You know, because by that stage, I've usually had some kind of correspondence ahead of time, and I'm only telling people, okay, I'll take a look at what you got if I think it's somewhat viable. Sometimes I just get sent things completely out of the blue, and I'm like, I don't really know about that. But I've never had anything that's been so off the wall crazy where I'm like flipping out, kind of like how I just read your question. It's maybe kind of a boring answer, but it's really more of just like a, yeah, that's probably not going to do very well for our customers, and it's probably not the right fit for the product mix that we have, or, you know, they're probably way too small, and, you know, if we started to sell this, they would not be able to keep up with demand, and that would cause problems. Those are usually the kind of boring real life answers that usually come out of the question that you're asking here. So a lot of times I think it's like Etsy type products, you know, like somebody's hand making, you know, leather pen wraps, or, you know, some kind of like wax seal type product, or, you know, it's not often pens. I've definitely been approached by pen makers. I did the same thing when I was making pens out of kit, you know, wood pens out of kit pens. I approached, you know, some various retailers and see if they wanted to do it. And I made all the same mistakes. I was like, oh yeah, I would love to, you know, sell you my handmade pen at $50 and you can sell it for $60. And it's like, no retailer is going to sell it at that, because there's a lot that goes into retailing. They're going to need a little more. And if you're in the retailing business, you know, you need a little more margin than that. So it just, you know, that's what a lot of it was. And honestly, thinking back to what I was doing when I was pen making, I was like, I was producing nowhere near as many pens as I would have needed to actually be able to wholesale them. So it's just, a lot of it's just people that haven't been through kind of the business cycle and don't really know that. So that's a lot of times, and I'll honestly explain that to them. I'll be like, look, here's the deal. You know, empower through education is one of our core values in our company. I've been there from the manufacturing side and from the craft, that handmade, and you're just like, if I could only get my pen listed on a retailer's site, then I could become big. That like never works, really. You know, just the honest truth, whether it's ink, whether it's pen cases, whether it's pens, really anything writing related, and probably most anything related. It's not that you're just, you know, a small manufacturer, and if only you could get your stuff out in front of enough people, you would be able to sell it and your business would be exploding. That's really not how it works. It's usually actually the opposite. Most retailers are not going to want to carry your product until you have awareness, until you are so busy manufacturing that you can't even take the time to pack up the orders that you're shipping out the door. That's usually the sign that you are ready to go wholesale, because you're going to give up margin as a manufacturer. You're going to give up margin to your retailer on the wholesaling side. You know, if you're selling direct on Etsy or eBay or whatever it is, or through your own website, you're making all of the manufacturing, wholesaling, retailing, you're making up all that margin. And we can get into all kinds of conversations about, you know, how much margin is appropriate and all this kind of stuff. But I can tell you from having been on all sides of it at this point, yeah, a little bit less on the wholesaling side, but from being in different parts of it now, you know, there's good reasons why things cost what they do, because there's a lot that's involved in offering you the beautifully curated products that you see on our site. It takes a lot to make that happen. So anyway, that's a whole other discussion. I won't get into that too much. But really, that's what I end up getting into if they're even at a point where they're able to have that conversation. And usually I'm not able to have that conversation with somebody unless they've been doing it for a couple of years and kind of have a following and they're pretty, well known for what they do. They've kind of found their niche. But if they're in like the, hey, I have this idea for a product, can I send you a prototype? I'm like, no. Like, I'm a retailer. I cannot offer prototypes to customers. Like, we put products on our website. They need to be consistent. Like, when you shop on our site, what you receive in the mail should look like what's on our site. If you get something and it's different and you're like, what the heck is this? Like, this isn't what I wanted to buy. It's something different. You're probably not going to see that as like a happy surprise. You're going to be like, this isn't what I was expecting. And until you're making things with that level of consistency, you're just not ready for retailing, at least through a brick and mortar or through an online store. Brick and mortar is a little different because people actually get to pick up the very product that they could take home with them. Through online like this, you got to have that consistency. So that's really what trips a lot of people up. So to get to some of the more fun part of the question, here in a second, I'm going to show you just some of the things. I'm not even going to name any names or brands or anything because I do not want you to ask me about these, because these are things that I have not carried for a number of very legitimate reasons on my end, but I at least want to show you some of the general things that I get that are kind of fun. So I know my team is probably going to hate me for showing you this stuff because they're going to get asked questions about it a lot. But I'm saying to you right now, please do not ask my team questions about these products that I'm going to show you because they have not even seen them themselves half the time. Because a lot of these products I have are like from like 5-6 years ago that are just like super old. Not all of them, but some of them. But yes, to kind of close up the concept I was just talking about, I will always try to take the time to educate somebody on the business side of things if I think that they can like really kind of understand it and grab onto it and learn something from it. If they're just like completely naive, I'll just like tell them a couple of things and be like, you really need to just contact me again in 6 months. And then if you're still around, we can talk. Because the truth is business is hard and you just got to figure it out. I went through the same thing. I tried to sell pens for 3 years and I made really good pens, but I couldn't make it work because I just had to figure out my niche. So you got to figure out your stuff. So some things that I have been sent that are kind of fun. And I will not say any names or anything like that, but I've got like a pewter pen holder here. So kind of an interesting little thing here. But I think this one was just didn't know if that would kind of mesh with our thing. I don't get asked a lot about pen stands and pen stuff like that. If you're interested in pen stands, maybe make a comment or something, but we very seldom get asked about that. Got another little pen holder. This one's actually kind of cool, and I kind of keep this on my desk because it matches my Pilot Metropolitan. Very nice. This one was a little pricey. It's like a hand-blown glass, very fancy. This one I could see like possibly in the future maybe, but it ended up being kind of pricey for what I thought most people would really want for it. It was like in the $130 price range. So I don't know. That was like I kind of like the product, but I just don't know. This is kind of interesting. They're like stamped like paper clip things. So they have stamped different like patterns and things on it. And you like, instead of actually stapling your thing, you like fold over the corner of your paper and then you fold this thing onto it. Kind of interesting. And I was like, not really hitting the mark probably for what most of my folks are looking for. Various notebooks and stuff like that, just like has a little train on it and it's kind of cute, but it's like, I'm not so sure. A lot of times with notebooks, I will have people that contact me and I'm like, send me a sample. Oh, your paper is fountain pen friendly? Oh, okay, send it to me. And I get it and I'm like, this isn't fountain pen friendly. Like, unless you're like in the fountain pen like thing, like you guys know, trying to find really good fountain pen friendly paper is difficult. And 90% of the paper that I sample up is like, oh, this would be such a cool notebook if it had good paper. This one is kind of interesting. It's a notebook that looks kind of like an Oreo cookie, kind of interesting. It doesn't say Oreo, but that's what comes to mind. So it's called a cookie book. This one is kind of interesting, but again, the consistency thing. So it's a notebook, like a hand-stitched notebook that's actually made out of cigar box tops. Neat concepts, but consistency would be very difficult for me. You know, and then here's another one, just, you know, kind of interesting, but a little unique. Let's see what else we got. This is a handmade notebook that I got that's literally like, you want to talk about a binding. It's literally just like stitched straight up through. It's one signature in the entire notebook. It's like super rustic. It's one signature, the fattest notebook signature I've ever seen, to the point where it like flares out like this, which I guess is a look, you know, and it's like kind of threaded in the back here. You know, just, this was a long time ago. I don't know what happened with that one exactly. And then it's like this notebook, you know, I think it's the same company, but it like, you kind of goes out like this and you take notes on it like that. And I think it's like lined on one side and plain on the other. Kind of interesting, but like, I'm like, okay, if I went to a meeting and I was like, let me take this note, you know, hey, maybe I'm missing out on something, I don't know. And then this one, this is a glass pen. I think this was like a really nice glass pen that was just made from, like, handmade by somebody, and they just couldn't like do the, you know, kind of cool looking, right? But it was like really kind of a high-end glass pen, and I was like, I don't know if that's really for us. I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of like $100 or $130 or something like that. You know, when we're selling like J or Bond pens for like 25, 35, you know. So that's where that kind of fell. So I mean, I do get some kind of cool stuff. It's nothing that I get like, I'm like totally rolling in my eyes and being like, yikes. Some of it's like, oh, not quite hitting the mark, or it would be cool, but I really think the price would be prohibitive, you know, especially if you're dealing with, you know, small manufacturers and stuff like that, and they just don't do enough volume to buy their stuff in quantity and have a very refined production process. Everything's very handmade and time consuming, so they have to charge. So a lot of times selling direct for them is really the only thing that makes sense until they get really productionized. So that's most of what I deal with, or notebooks that don't have good paper. So there you go. But you know, there are some, so before I finish that whole concept there are some companies that I run into where things actually do pan out well. Robert Oster is a more recent example. You know, small manufacturer that is expanding, and we're kind of getting in on the ground floor. Edison pens, by all means, they weren't that. I mean, they never did a production pen before us. We collaborated and did their first production pen, the Premier. That's why it's named the Premier, because it was a premiere for them and for us. So that was an example of a successful, you know, kind of thing like that. But they were pretty well known. Tactile Turn, Karas Kustoms, both Kickstarters that, you know, were around for a little while and have, you know, grown into full-fledged companies. So it definitely can happen, but man, I tell you, the odds are stacked against you. So take some serious consideration on my part. And the last question I have for this week, this is from CY on Facebook. What are some products on your site that are commonly wishlisted, is that a word, but do not sell as well as one would hope, given the wish listing? So wish lists are one thing, on our site. Wish list is just like, you're cruising our site, you're like, oh, that seems kind of cool, wish list. You know, oh, okay, that's whatever, I'll show that to my sister later, wish list. Wish list is very non-committal, and it's there's a lot of products on the wish list. So I think trying to get any meaningful data out of the wish list would be very difficult for us, but we're not like mining our wish list data at this point to try to gather anything meaningful out of it, partly because, one, we haven't technologically been able to do that very easily. We had bugs with our wish list for a long time, so it wouldn't have helped much anyway. I think most of that's fixed now. But, you know, it's completely hit or miss as far as, because, you know, think about wish list is like, it's like window shopping, right? Like, you're not committed at all. If people put it on the wish list, it would probably be very little indication as to whether people would actually buy it or not. So I find that that's not really the most reliable way to go about it. The email notification is a whole other thing, because if you think about, you know, the email when back in stock, that's what I'm talking about. So if a product's out of stock, you can sign up for your email to be put on there. We can see how many people are on that email list. Now, granted, that's also very non-committal. It's not like a pre-order or a back order or anything like that. We don't have anything like that currently on our site, because sometimes our stock is so spotty, we just can't even make that commitment. But we always have the email notification list because we want you to be notified as soon as we put something back in stock. But also it helps us to look, especially when it's a new product that's never been out yet. Those are the toughest to gauge what kind of demand or what kind of interest there is. And there's a huge difference between how much is being talked about online or how much we're being asked about it versus how many people are actually buying it. And the more expensive a product gets, the less reliable any of this becomes. You know, if you're talking about ink, paper to a degree, you know, notebooks, you know, paper is kind of a whole other story. Paper is almost its own thing. But like the less expensive the product is, usually the better a gauge that list can be, and more predictable. When you get into like $300 and $500 pens, that email notification list is hardly a great judge anyway. It's usually way over what the people actually come through and buy it. So there's some factors like their limited editions are a complete roll of the dice. You know, the Lamy 2000 Black Amber is a perfect example. We way overbought on that, just being straight up honest, because it was like limited number of pens worldwide. We have no idea what the demand is going to be. The price is shifted on us too, you know, as far as what Lamy is, you know, allowing us to advertise. So, you know, that's why we have a deal right now where you can get a Lamy 2000 with, you know, the Macrolon with the Lamy 2000 Black Amber. It's like a BOGO sort of thing. So that's why we have that deal right now. We just straight up overbought, you know, and that's how it is. So rather than fire sailing it, we're doing a gift with purchase. So anyway, but it's very difficult to predict that kind of stuff, you know, very, very difficult. So the email notification list helps us tremendously to try to gauge what potential actual demand there could be for something. And we've had a number of times where, especially like ink releases and stuff like that, stuff that's never been out before, where we can see like, oh my gosh, we have, you know, we ordered 20 of them, but there's 70 people on the email notification list. We need to place another order. Let's at least order up to the list. And then, you know, because we don't know who's going to actually follow through and buy it, but if we know if it's that much of a discrepancy, we need to order up more. And it helps us a lot of times to keep from being out of stock at the initial launch of things. It doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. So that's a huge help to us. That's more reliable than the wish list thing. You know, so, okay, you're asking me like what products are commonly, you know, whatever, wish listed or email notification listed. A lot of times it's new ink that comes out, new colors of popular pens, things like, you know, the seasonal or Lamy Safari and the Lamy All-Star. Those, it helps tremendously to have an idea of how many of those are, because, you know, those are so popular. We could be way off, you know, our numbers without having something to latch onto. So that helps a tremendous deal. Yeah, the limited edition stuff and the seasonal things that are like pens that are pretty well known, but it's just a different color, that helps a tremendous deal. It's difficult if it's an entirely new pen. Lower price stuff, it helps a little bit more. Pens in like the, you know, $50 to $150 range, it helps a bit. Gets a little more difficult when you get into gold nibs and stuff like that. And then ink, it usually helps a great deal with ink. Of course, like brand new ink is not as common necessarily, but you know, things like Robert Oster, like we knew Fire and Ice was going to be very popular. It was talked about on social media a lot, but then we saw there were a lot of people on the list. And then of course, once we actually get it in stock and it starts to sell, we're like, okay, we need to order up even more. But sometimes we'll have it be where, you know, we are out of something for several months at a time. And then we have 50 people on our email notification list. And the manufacturer is really behind and they send us 5, you know, and we're like, I don't think we want to notify 50 people when we only have 5 of them. We have another shipment that's coming in 2 weeks and we're going to get 45. Let's wait on that 5, hold them, get the other shipment in, launch all of them, let all 50 people know we'll have 50 of the things. And then, so that helps a tremendous deal, you know, but it's an art form, I tell you, it really is. And I got a whole team that analyzes that kind of stuff on a daily basis when we're getting stuff, because we have 3,700 products or somewhere thereabouts, depends on the day, but it's a lot to keep track of, but that helps a great deal. All right, my question of the week this week as we close out, going back to demonstrator pens. This is always fun to talk about demonstrators. I would like to know, what is your favorite ink to use in your demonstrator pen and why? Why? I always want to know why. That's it for this week. You can check out everything I talked about here for the most part on gouletpens.com, except for all that stuff I showed you there. Be sure to, you know, sign up for our subscription. I'm like falling apart at the end here. Be sure to subscribe to YouTube if you haven't already. Leave comments on YouTube or on the blog. Be sure to ask questions for next week as well on any of our platforms because we compile them all. And I just really hope you have a great weekend and a good rest of your week. Appreciate you watching, appreciate you hanging out with me. Thanks so much for watching, and right on.